Thank you so much for a very generous introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, and Salam Kebajikan. My dear friend, Bapak Presiden ADB, we call it Bapak Presiden, is Presiden ADB Sir Asakawasan, Pak Winfried, which is, we miss you here actually, so you should come back to Indonesia rather than heading the Southeast Asia VP. And all colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers and participants. It is truly an honor for me to be here and to be invited as a keynote speech for ADB Southeast Asia Development Symposium. The title of this symposium is Imagining a Net-Zero ASEAN. I don't think the ASEAN could achieve net zero without Indonesia participation because we are the biggest country, the biggest economy in ASEAN. So the role of Indonesia in this imagination of net zero ASEAN is truly relevant and important. I would like to convey my appreciation to all distinguished participants and speakers who joined this event today in person, and certainly a warm welcome to you all to Bali. A very nice place, so don't waste your time only from the room to another room, as Winfried mentioned that today is going to be very full. Please spare a little bit of your time going outside and enjoy the beach, the island of God, and in a very pleasant temperature and climate. Indonesia has taken several steps to support the net zero emission. Recently, our country submitted even the enhanced national determined contribution. This is the NDC is how each country have their own commitment to reduce the CO2 emission during the Paris Agreement. And for Indonesia, each year we review this commitment. And recently we just submitted the enhanced NDC to the UNFCCC Secretariat. The enhanced reduction of the emission initially targeted 29% reduction with our own effort and 41% reduction with the international and global support. Now it's been revised up, the reduction from 29 to 31.89% with our own effort, and from 41% to 43.2% with the global support. The enhanced NDC is a transition toward the Indonesia updated NDC, which we've already also mainstreamed to the long-term low growth and climate resilience strategy. So this is not just one separate document or commitment, but we've already integrated within our long-term low carbon and climate resilience strategy by 2050. This is a vision for Indonesia to achieve net zero emission by 2060 or sooner. As mentioned by President Massa, in order to achieve this commitment, financing is definitely critical. You cannot just have a commitment without any resources to support that. According to the estimation, by biennial estimation, BUR, total climate finance that is required to achieve our NDC is 4,002 trillion rupiah. I think you don't have any imagination if I put it in rupiah, so I will translate it in US dollar. It's 281 billion US dollar until 2030. It was projected to be fulfilled, of course, with public and private investment. The cumulative spending of our own budget, the central government budget, until 2021 is 313 trillion. This is only 8% of the total investment needs. And that's why it is very imperative for all of us to be able to design the right policy framework and regulatory framework, as well as investment climate, so that we are going to be able to attract more private participation, both domestically and globally. We also require, or in this case, inviting many philanthropists to be also participate in this kind of important commitment. The government of Indonesia has already issued a number of fiscal incentives as well as innovative financing in order for us to bridge this gap and to create a catalytic fund for the investment in green projects and developing green industries. The incentive including using tax holiday, tax allowance, facility on a VAT, import duty, and even on a property tax. We also invented instruments like issuing green sukuk and SDG bonds at both global level and domestic level. It is expected that our SDG bond and the sukuk green bond will reduce 10.6 million CO2 emission. From the legislation point of view, we know that this commitment needs to be supported by the consistent regulatory framework. That's why Indonesia, we just issuing regulatory framework on the carbon pricing, as well as important legislation to introduce carbon tax. This policy will use the carbon trading and non-trade instrument, including the carbon tax, to internalize the external costs of greenhouse gas emission under the polluter pay principle. According to the IPCC synthesis report, which is launched last week, the global surface temperature during the industrialization phase 2020-2021 has reached 1.1 degrees centigrade compared to the pre-industrialization phase. So this is very close to 1.5 degrees centigrade, which we've already recognized as very consequential level in terms of the climate change disaster. Greenhouse gas emission from the energy sector, especially the coal-fired power plant, CFPPs, are identified as a major contributor to carbon emission globally. And according to the International Energy Agency, coal power generation accounted for approximately 38% of global CO2 emission from energy in 2019. So when we talk and we discuss imagining net zero, it is impossible without addressing the issue of this coal power plant. The fact that all countries to develop and to make a progress definitely need energy, but all countries still actually rely on fossil fuel, including coal, is the challenge. For Indonesia, this is even a bigger challenge because we are among the biggest coal producer, and our coal power plant is actually explaining more than 60% of the total energy mix in Indonesia. So for us to be able to deliver our net zero emission by 2060 or earlier, it is impossible without addressing the issue of this coal power plant. Let us look at the ASEAN. The ASEAN countries depend heavily on fossil fuel for economic as well as industrial development. Fossil fuel, in this case, contributed over 75% of the energy mix by 2019. Renewable energy contributed only 14%. ASEAN increased the renewable energy contribution, the plan, by 20 to 23% by 2025. Indonesia also have the same ambition. To achieve this 23% renewable in the energy mix, the region would need to invest 27 billion in renewable energy every year. But from 2016 to 2021, we only attracted 8 billion per year for the renewable energy. So it's less than 1/3. In ASEAN, the proportion of coal by 2022, nearly 32% in a total ASEAN country power generation. In Indonesia is higher. So it is critical for ASEAN to address, on the one hand, the need to have energy security, but also at the same time, energy affordability and sustainability. When we discuss about the affordability, that need to be measured, the price of energy which is affordable for the people, for the industries or economy, for the government budget in terms of the support, including subsidy. For us, designing the transition of the energy is very important. The limited access to the international capital market, lack of domestic resource mobilization, that create additional challenge of designing the right energy transition mechanism and policy framework. And that's why, in this occasion, I would like to express my highest appreciation to President Massa and all the ADB colleagues who work very closely with Indonesia to launch the energy transition mechanism during the COP26 Glasgow. This is the design of policy framework which try to mobilize a transformative blended finance program which will combine the concessional as well as the competitively priced market fund. And this is becoming very challenging because the market now, the interest is becoming very, very high and expensive, in which we need to mobilize a low enough cost financing package that can incentivize and accelerate retirement of coal or repurposing our coal-fired power plants and at the same time scale up replacement on a clean energy technology. The ETM, which is tailored, replicable, scalable, market-based, and fair, mean to accelerate the transition toward clean energy. In the G20 summit here in Bali last year, we also signed MOU to explore the first project in the ETM project, the early retirement of 660 megawatt coal-fired power plant in West Java. So Indonesia is not talking and speaking about the framework, but we really want to test this formulation of policy as well as commitment from many global to the real case by retiring 660 megawatt coal-fired plant in West Java. I do hope that this is going to go through and becoming a real test kit for us to implement the just and affordable principle of the energy transition. And as President Massa mentioned, we do hope this is going to be also an example for all countries to see what it will take for us to deliver the commitment in such a very complex environment and ecosystem. We've been working very hard and relentlessly with many support. So I would like to express all the support that we receive to continue implement and testing this ETM country platform. We've already also appointed our special mission vehicle under the Ministry of Finance to develop and continue working closely with all partners as a country platform manager of the ETM, PTSMI. With that, we do hope that we are going to be able to build the critical foundation, including contributing for the taxonomy of transition finance. This is also will hopefully providing an encouragement for the financial institution to support activities that aim to net zero emission, especially on the energy sector. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the very important challenges on the climate finance is how we could align global investment rules to incentivize investment into the program and sector that can achieve reduction of the emission. So ASEAN country has launched recently the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance, which is now entering the second phase or version. The release of the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance version 2 include, most importantly, energy transition activity in its green and amber categories of activity that will eligible for financing. We do hope that this will help the financing from especially many sources who their commitment is very strong, but now we are paving the way for them to continue and implement also their commitment for financing. The ASEAN Taxonomy version 2 that is already released regarded as the first taxonomy to include energy transition activity in its green and amber categories, hopefully will also mobilize and put it a much easier and workable path for financing the ETM, especially not only for Indonesia, but all other countries within ASEAN. Indonesia and Vietnam is actually now working very closely to develop this. The ASEAN region is very important to contribute to this climate change commitment. So we are the world's largest, fastest growing economy. That definitely require more energy, but it doesn't mean that increasing energy use for the development identical with more CO2 emission. We are committed to continue growing, but we also strongly committed to achieve our net zero emission by 2060 or earlier. Energy sector is going to be the most important test whether this commitment could be delivered through financing and all the policy framework that we are continue improve in order for us to be able to achieve those commitments. I believe the Southeast Asia Development Symposium today, with the imagination of Net-Zero ASEAN, is not going to be stopped to become just the imagination or imagining, but it's become a concrete pathway for all of us to be able to deliver the most critical and the most important commitment to save humanity from the climate disaster. Thank you so much for your attention, and I do hope that you are all having a very productive meeting here. Thank you so much.